Hi, this is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next I'm going to talk about the differences between CGC and CBCS. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Now, I'm a little nervous about doing this video because I feel like it's kind of like a minefield right now, and I'm completely prepared for downvotes and negative comments and all kinds of things. So, everybody can kind of like try to, maybe don't downvote me until you've actually, watched the whole video, that kind of thing. I would really appreciate that. So, I have seen, a variety of videos out and just people talking about this recently because there has been a lot of talk about CGC versus CBCS lately. This really started with the price increases that came recently from CGC, but it's kind of been building for a while because for the last few months, CGC has really had quite a few problems with their quality control and long turnaround times. So there's definitely been kind of this like rumbling about, people that are upset with CGC, and so obviously the conversation moves to CBCS, as the big alternative that's out there right now. And, I totally get it with those issues. It is frustrating. They are supposed to be the best in the industry, and at this point, they really don't seem to be performing that way. So, with that, let's compare these two. Now, the caveat I want to give with this is that, it doesn't matter to me if you send your books in to get graded or not. If you want to, great. If you don't, that is also fine. Doesn't matter to me who you send your books into. I don't have any skin in the game with CGC or CBCS or anything like that. It has no impact on me. This is just my opinion, things that I've seen based on my experiences with comics. And the last thing is I feel like there's no reason to be tribal, around these grading companies. There's a lot of people who seem to get really defensive about, which company you should use and that kind of thing. And, it's just the company that's grading comics. There's no need to be, mean or, that kind of stuff. So please, I'm totally fine with comments and all that kind of thing, but, try to keep everything professional if you can. So with that, I had 6 different areas that I was comparing with CGC and CBCS. There are definitely more, but these were the ones that I decided to talk about for this video. And the one I wanted to talk about first, because I feel like this, for me, is the most important one. And I think for a lot of people, not everybody, is the most important one. And that is the value of the graded book. And, for me, as someone who sells quite a few books, the most important thing is the value that I can get for that book, the return on investment for that book if it's graded by one of these companies. And I was scrolling through the results of the recent Comic Link auction, and that's really what kind of made me decide to make this video. Because I see a lot of people say that CBCS books sell for the same amount as CGC, or that they're close in value, that kind of thing, and the fact of the matter is that really isn't true. And so I've got a few different numbers to show for that. So the reason I really like the Comic Link auctions is because they tend to be just huge, tons of books. And this one, I think it was somewhere around 10,000 books. And so because of that, they tend to have a lot of the same book that comes up for sale. And they will occasionally have a CGC and a CBCS book that come up for sale of the same book in the same grade. And the important thing here is that they're both selling within seconds of each other, very close to each other. And because what I've experienced as a seller of, CGC and CBCS books is that CGC books sell quicker. Now, you can sell a CBCS book as fast, but you're going to sell it for less. You can also sell a CBCS book often for the same amount as a CGC book, but it will take you longer to sell it. And so Comic Link takes that out of the equation because they're selling at almost the exact same time. It's the same people that are there, the same bidders, the same people that are interested in that book. And so it really shows you the differences in price between CGC and CBCS for the same book in the same grade. Now, I've got 3 examples I'm going to show from this recent Comic Link auction. And the first one right here is Conan 1 and an 8.5. where a CGC 8.5 sold for $1,005, and then a few seconds later, a CBCS 8.5 sold for $675. I mean, that is a huge difference. That is approximately a 50% premium for the CGC book over the CBCS book. Now, the CGC book was white pages, so I'll say, that will give it a little bit of a premium, but not 50%. And so, even with that, that is a significantly higher sale for the same book. Next one, right here, is a Hulk 1. Now, it isn't actually the exact same grade. It was a CGC 1.5 that sold for $9,611 and a CBCS 1.8 that sold for $8,104. So the CBCS book was a higher grade and it sold for $1,500 less. That means the CGC book sold for 20% more with a lower grade. And if you actually go and look at these books, the CBCS one is nicer. It is a much nicer presenting book. And so it was a better looking book and it sold for less. So that really does say a lot with the difference in price between these. Now, that didn't happen every single time. It wasn't, 50% or 20% every single time. Got one more example right here. And this is an Amazing Spider-Man 300 in a 9.6. And the CGC sold for $2,150, and the CBCS sold for $2,078. So that's only a difference of $72. That's about 3.5%. And so yeah, that is a lot smaller. That one is much closer, but the bottom line is the CGC book sold for more. So if your primary concern is the value of your book, the return on your book if you're going to be selling it, CGC is the winner. It is the one that kind of like takes this round, with the comparisons of price between similar books, similar grades, and what they actually sold for. Now, the next area that I wanted to talk about was really become the kind of the second most important thing between these two companies, and that's kind of a combination of turnaround times, prices, and quality control. So it's kind of that general user experience with the company. And CGC right now has huge turnaround times, months turnaround times for when they get the book to when they actually grade it. CGC also just raised their prices, so they're more expensive, and they were already more expensive than CBCS before the price increase. So now they're, an even higher premium over CBCS for the cost of getting your book graded. CGC also has had massive quality control issues right now. I've seen this in multiple YouTubers that are just unboxing CGC boxes. These aren't plants, or anything like that. I mean, the Dorkeries just did one where they had a case that was cracked, they sent it back, and then it came back and the book was flipped. The front was, the front of the book was on the back side of the case. So it's like there was a problem and then they were supposed to fix it and they just made another problem. And then Comic Book Investments has talked about how every 25 book submission he submits, he has crack cases that come back. Jason Parker had flipped labels on multiple books that he sent in. And Southern Comic Geek, I've also seen flipped labels on books that he sent in. And so those are quality control issues that, in my mind, there is no excuse for. If they have somebody that's supposedly reviewing those books and they're letting those out, that person shouldn't work there anymore. If it's one of the new people that they've hired, that person shouldn't work there anymore. That is not a difficult task. You're looking at the book. Is it the book that matches the label? Is it the book that is facing the correct direction? I mean, these are some pretty simple things that should be right, and that should never be the issue. Crack cases, problems with shipping. I mean, if the shipping is bad, that's been another thing that's been recent. If the packaging is bad, there's no excuse for that. But if it's just postal damage, I mean, that kind of thing can happen to anybody. But if it's something that's within their control, these types of issues shouldn't be there, and especially not at the volume that we're seeing right now. Now, CBCS has faster turnaround times, and they're also, like I said, less expensive. They also aren't receiving the volume of CGC right now. So with the people that are currently switching over or saying they're switching over to CBCS, we'll see how they handle that volume. Will they be able to handle that uptick in volume? Will they potentially raise prices as well because of that uptick in volume? And we'll we'll see. Now, I was watching the Pressable Defects show where they did the interview at the recent Comic-Con, and the CBCS representative insulted CGC for raising their prices. So they've kind of put themselves in a spot where they really can't raise their prices now. And so we'll see how, what happens with that, because I'll be kind of interested to see how that turns out. Now, I have also seen flipped labels with CBCS. There's a seller on Instagram that goes by Flip Mode Comics, and they were selling some books recently, and one of them was from CBCS, where it was 2 books from CBCS with the labels flipped. So they are not immune to that. It does also happen there, but clearly we do appear to see it a lot more from CGC. So in terms of turnaround time, prices, quality control, CBCS is definitely the winner right now. But the thing you got to think about with things like cost, the price of the book, if you are looking to sell it, if you're paying a few extra dollars to get that book graded and you make hundreds of dollars more from the CGC book, it doesn't matter. You're taking nickels, and throwing away dollars. It still makes sense to go with CGC on the monetary side, but if you're worried about turnaround times, if you're worried about having to deal with the hassles of quality control, CBCS definitely the leader right now in that area. Now, the next area I'm going to talk about are the cases themselves. So, I don't think there's a lot of argument that the old CGC cases kind of suck and the old CBCS cases kind of suck. So I've got examples of both of those. And so this is one of the old, this isn't the really old CGC case, so this isn't the square label. Not going to go into those, those are from the first couple years of the company. But this is basically the label they used from about 2003 until pretty recently. They did a changeover maybe a couple years ago. It's about like that now. But so this is one of their older cases, and you can see they are extremely thin. These are not, like they're pretty flimsy. They don't feel solid. They aren't sealed, on the sides like the other, like the newer ones. And so, when people would crack them out of the case, you wouldn't have to use the whole, prying them open. You could basically just rip them open. And then this is one of the older CBCS cases, and thicker, but they feel really cheap. They've got these little latch things at the top, and nothing feels good about these cases. I do not like the old CBCS cases. They just feel really cheap. They're also the plastic is tends to it looks nice on camera, I guess, but the plastic tends to be a lot cloudier than the new cases. Let's see if we've got one for comparison. So this is one of the new cases, and you can just see how much clearer a new case is versus the older ones. And so there's not a lot that's real desirable about the older cases. So we'll kind of ignore that and we'll focus on the new ones, because that's what they're providing now if you're submitting books in. So the new CGC cases, they are, like I showed, much more clear, and so I think it's good to have them for comparison. Much more clear. They're also thicker. Let's see if I can. The cases are thicker than the old ones, and depending on the book, if you have some of these deeper books, the CGC cases are actually quite a bit thicker. And now, one downside for CGC cases is that, and you can see it on this one right here on the edge there. See that right here? So those are Newton rings. Now, me personally, I don't care at all about Newton rings. Newton rings do not impact the book. It is something that's a slight impediment to the appearance of the book, but I do not care about Newton rings. They mean nothing to me. But a lot of people do have concerns with them, and CBCS cases do not have Newton rings. So this is one of the new ones, and there are no Newton rings on CBCS cases, the new cases. So that is definitely one big positive for CBCS. Now, another thing is that there are complaints about CGC books. Sometimes the book will move in the inner well. This one doesn't. And the CBCS ones, from everything I've heard and any experience I've had with them, they never do. The inner well doesn't move. But I have had CGC books where it moves in the inner well, and while it's not a huge deal, it can become a problem if case gets shifted around quickly or something like that. It can cause the book to move inside, which can then cause damage. I have seen slabs where the book has detached, the cover has detached inside the slab, and that tends to be something that happens because of that loose book inside. So that can be a big negative. So I think that's something that, again, CGC really does need to work on to address. Another big difference in the cases is that CGC can do magazine-size books, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like Savage Sword of Conan, you know, those types of books. CBCS can't yet. Now, I did see an interview recently with the founder of CBCS with Go Collect, with one of the people on Go Collect, and he said they are looking into adding magazine-size slabs. So they, hopefully will have that type of, option in the future, but they don't today. So if you want to do a magazine-size book, CGC is your only option. You can't go with CBCS. So when I compare the two next to each other, I think they both look. I think they both look pretty great. I do like both cases. They're both very clear. CBCS has the advantage that it doesn't have the Newton rings. CGC cases still feel a little sturdier to me. I still like they're a smoother edge. This is a little more like square edge, and I like the smoother edge on the CGC cases. So I think it does come down to personal preference really between the two. But there have been a number of polls on what people prefer between the two cases, and CGC wins every time by a pretty large margin. Now, a lot of that complaint seems to come from the labels of the CBCS cases, so we're going to talk about that next. So the next area are the labels, and these are both universal graded copies. You can see they're both blue color, and they look relatively similar. They both have details about the book, but one of the big differences is that the CGC case has the number, broken out into kind of like its own little separate box, that white box. And that seems to be something that a lot of people really like, myself included. I like that it is called out a little bit more on the case, because, that's what you're sending this in for. You're sending it in to get that grade, and I like that that's called out a little more there, and it seems that a lot of other people do as well. One other thing is that the CBCS labels have changed quite a bit over the years. They keep changing the style, they change the colors. Let's see, I've got this one back here. You can see like this one, the label is white with a completely different CBCS symbol on it. They have a lot of different types, and including one that is kind of like a big joke from their past that has these like rivets on it, so it's supposed to look like a safe or something. It looks terrible. And so the CBCS labels have had a lot of variety over the relatively short lifetime of that company, whereas with CGC, you can see that this older label still looks relatively similar to the new label. And so I think that's something that a lot of people really like, myself included, is that if I buy an older slab and I have a newer slab, they still look nice next to each other. They look similar. Whereas with the CBCS slabs, if you have an older one or a newer one, they can look really different next to each other. And so I think that consistency in the labels is a big positive for CGC over CBCS. Now, the other side of it is when you start getting into the details of the label. So with CGC, they have custom labels. I personally am not a big fan of the custom labels. I like having the details about the book, like the appearances, that kind of thing, on that front label. But if you get the custom labels, it gets all moved to the back. But a lot of people really like those custom labels. And so that's a big thing with CGC that is a positive for a lot of people. Now, maybe CBCS will prove me wrong, but I do not see them changing that on their side anytime in the near future, because their founder has been in multiple interviews where he says he doesn't like those. He doesn't think the label should be anything that detracts from the book. And, that's his personal opinion, but honestly, I think he should be looking to his customers, what his customers want. And clearly, his customers like custom labels. They like having something that's a little more unique or special on that label, and so his preference on that, I think, seems to hurt the company a fair amount in terms of if people are willing to go over there or not, because that is a very consistent thing that I see in a lot of comment sections on different videos, is that people are like, oh, if they change the label, I'm switching. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that the label complaint is pretty big on the CBCS side. Now, the other part of labels that I think is important for the comparison between the two is how they designate different types of books. So with CGC, you have a blue label for universal, a yellow label for signature, what's called the tuxedo label for pedigrees. It's kind of like a gray and black one. The purple label for restored, the green label for qualified, and the kind of grayish blue label for conserved. And so that gives you a very clear delineation between the different types of books and how they've been graded, and what's been done to that book, where it's easily identifiable. But with CBCS, they have a blue label and a yellow label, and that is it. Now, you might see a red label if you see some older slabs, because they used to use the red label for the verified signatures, the ones that weren't witnessed, but they got rid of that, and now all of their signatures are yellow labels. So they just have the blue and the yellow, and they don't have a restored option. They don't have a qualified option. They don't have a conserved option or a pedigree option. Now, they will designate those things on the label. Like the blue label will say restored above the grade, or it'll have something that designates it as a pedigree in the label. But there's nothing that differentiates it from the perspective of the person looking at the book that's very clear. And so I think that's a big downside. I don't like that. For me personally, I don't like that they all look blue. I want something that clearly shows me, oh, this was restored, or this was graded as qualified, or this is, a pedigree book, or, something like that. I like having those options, and it seems that a lot of other people do too, because again, the labels are a big complaint for a lot of people with CBCS. So I think when we're talking labels, CGC is the clear winner in, this round of the comparisons. All right, now this next one, it really seems to be kind of like a rallying cry around CBCS, and it's graders notes. And CGC, they sometimes provide them, sometimes they don't. And from my experience, they generally aren't all that useful. They aren't all that detailed. And now they are free if you submitted the book. If you paid to have the book graded, you can see those graders notes. So a lot of people try to complain about having to pay for graders notes, but you're not paying for it if you paid for the book to get graded. You're only paying for it if you are trying to get them after the fact. So with CBCS, they provide graders notes for free to everybody for all their books. And I believe every book will have graders notes except 9/8. I could be wrong, but I think it's all of them except 9/8. And with theirs, it's really easy to get them. They just have this QR code, up here on the back. You scan that, and then it takes you straight to the graders notes for that book, and you can see them. And so yeah, that is great. That is very helpful. And from what I've seen with CBCS graders notes, they do generally appear to be much more complete. They give you a more defined, story for why the grade is what it is. However, with that, kind of my question with graders notes is, if I'm the person submitting the book, why do I really care what the graders notes are? If I got the book pressed and clean, that kind of thing, I know what that book looks like. I can see the book in my hands. Even if I have to look at it at an angle, whatever, I can see what the imperfections are in that book. So it doesn't really matter, or shouldn't matter to me as the person submitting it. The only reason I can kind of see why the person submitting it cares about the graders notes is to complain about the grade. That's a big part of it, I think. People want to complain about the grade, and then, they don't have the graders notes, so they don't really know what to complain about. Now, the other side of it is aftermarket buyers, so somebody that you're selling the book to. Now, they might want to see those graders notes to see if they can improve the book, but from my perspective as somebody selling it, why do I care about that? Why am I wanting to, fund someone else trying to upgrade the book? Like that, because it's you paying for it. Whether you're paying for it or not, you're paying for it. Nothing is free. You're paying for those as part of it. And so, you're effectively funding the grader's notes for other people to look at and see if they can upgrade the book later. And so, I don't know. I mean, from my perspective there, I don't think the grader's notes are that big of a deal, but they do seem to be important for some people out there. And so CBCS definitely wins the free grader's notes and quality of the grader's notes kind of comparison. Now, one thing I do think that is important with respect to grader's notes, that it's what people really do want, whether they're kind of like saying it or not, is that they want something to help them learn how to grade their book, how to define certain grades. And so that's always one of the big complaints with both companies. There really isn't that transparency on how a book gets the grade that it gets. Now, I think there are a few reasons for this. I mean, Overstreet has very strict rules, but in my mind, Overstreet's rules are too rigid. They put you into these boxes with very specific flaws, and that's the thing with comics. Their comics have been around for decades. I mean, if you're going back to Action 1, you're over 80 years. And so you could have so many different flaws on these books, so many different combinations of flaws on these books. And that's why it's generally considered as subjective. But if you've looked at enough books, if you've looked at different videos that teach you how to grade, from like ETA Nick, for example, you learn what a book looks like in a certain grade. You can get to the point where you're within a half grade or dead on 95% of the time. And that's the thing. Like, when you watch some of these other channels where you have people that are very experienced at submitting to CGC or CBCS or whatever it is, and they're estimating their grades, and then they're pulling the the tape or whatever off the book, they're right 95% of the time, dead on, or almost 100% of the time within a half grade. And so that tells you that there are rules that are followed. You just have to learn what they are, and it's very difficult, like I said, I think, to put them down in writing because of that fuzziness that can be in there with the combinations of flaws, the endless combinations of flaws that can exist with these books in these different grades. Now, the last area that I hear people talk about a lot, with comparing the two companies, is the strictness in grading, or I also call it the consistency in grading. Now, from my experience, the consistency in grading between the two has been, almost identical. I know people like to say that CBCS grades more strictly or that kind of thing, but that just has not been my experience with books that I have had from CBCS and books that I've seen from the different companies. I generally see them grading almost identical. CBCS was founded by one of the original founders of CGC, the head, I believe, is the head grader of CGC. So it's not like they didn't have some type of similarity in their, background for, when their grading standards were established. So, generally my experience has been that they grade very similarly. Just something to always consider. There aren't, firm rules in any of this. When you're dealing with these really complex sets of flaws in a book, there's going to be a variety, and I don't like to say that one is always stricter than the other. I'm sure there are cases where CBCS is stricter than CGC, and there are cases where CGC is stricter than CBCS. So there's just going to be some variety that you're going to have in there, but overall, my experience has been that they effectively grade the same. So, from all of that, really, I don't think you can say that you should pick one or the other. It really comes down to what your priorities are for what you want to get from that graded book. And so, because my priority is maximizing the value of a book that I would send in to get graded, CGC is the choice that I would go with until the time that CBCS books are considered worth as much, that they sell for as much, or they sell for more. At that point, CBCS, that would be my primary priority with grading. Because you don't need to grade a book. Grading a book isn't a necessity. One of the primary reasons for grading a book is so that you have an impartial condition assigned to that book to make it easier to trade, to sell, whatever that might be. If everybody that says they're mad at CGC and are switching to CBCS go over there, then maybe that's what we'll see. Maybe we'll see this, comic market normalize between the different companies. And I would personally love that. You know, I think that's what it should be, because I think the thing that should really determine the value is the grade of the book. And like I said, I think they grade effectively identically. So I don't really think there should be a disparity in the prices, but today there is, and we'll see, you know, if that changes in the future. So I hope I provided some useful information. You know, if you like this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this, and I will see you in the next video.